Brought to you by the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Hello, friends. Jack, Flight School O'Brien here, also known as Jack. Still can touch net if I get a running start and haven't eaten heavy breakfast. O'Brien, both nicknames that I go by. Inviting you to check out Miles and Jack Got Mad Boosties for a weekly basketball conversation with me and my co-host from the Daily Zeitgeist, Miles Gray. We are joined by comedians, writers, podcasters, and fellow NBA fans as we discuss the latest news and events from around the league. Check it out. Miles and Jack Got Mad Boosties. Brought to you by the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander.
Hi, it's Gabby Reese, and this podcast is powered by Laird Superfood. It was created in our kitchen by my husband, big wave surfer Laird Hamilton, and it all started with a simple idea. What began as Laird's secret for long-lasting energy on the waves is now Laird Superfood, offering a full range of delicious plant-based creamers, coffee, greens, and more. Visit lairdsuperfood.com and use the code GABBY2024 and save 20% on your first order.
It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Let's go!
On Giants.com.
I like it.
And the Giants mobile app.
Boom, give me some juice.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's roll.
Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. My name is John Schmelk. Today, we're going to talk to Paul Kuharsky, who has been covering the Tennessee Titans for a very long time. You can find his work at paulkuharsky.com. You can find him on Twitter at Paul Kuharsky NFL. And the reason we wanted to talk to Paul today, we've had him on before. He's been part of our mock drafts in the spring when the Titans are picking around the Giants, which they are again this year, by the way. So we'll hear from Paul again later on in the spring. The Giants have brought in a lot of former coaches that were with the Tennessee Titans, so we thought it would be a good idea to get a feel for what those coaches bring to the table. Paul, it's good to talk to you, man. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well here. So let's start here. Give me your overarching 20,000-foot view. We'll start with Giants' new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, and what his defense was in Tennessee.
I think Shane Bowen, when the Titans were at their best and had their best talent, was a pretty good coordinator. Though, everything with Mike Vrabel's defensive staff comes couched with the fact that Mike Vrabel was a strong head coach, a hands-on head coach, and came from the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, I do think after some initial bobbles where maybe he was too hands-on, which led to the departure of his original defensive coordinator, I think Dean Pease, who he played for in New England, and then the transition year where he didn't have a defensive coordinator by title, but Shane Bowen was kind of acting in that regard. That he kind of clarified, promoted Shane, gave him the title, took him off of outside linebackers, and it got out of his way more. And I think the Titans, like most teams, with most coaches, got good work and had reasonable success when they had good talent. In the last year and a half, they did not have good talent. And so I think Shane went as the talent went. And when I'm talking about bad talent, I'm talking about really significantly bad talent. I mean, they had some really big misses in the draft. Caleb Farley, a number one first round draft pick, who, when he got healthy, had major injury issues. And when he was healthy, was playing special teams, was so far down in the dumps. So you take what should have been, their number one cornerback, and he's so far out of the mix that he's not even playing defense. This last year, he didn't play at all. It was on PUP the whole season with the back injury. And, everybody moves up a slot and you're not very good.
Yeah, look, Paul, it's funny. The second note for what I wanted to touch with you on is how much control did Vrabel have? The third one was talent on defense. So you've hit both of those already. So Let me try to dig in a little bit more on the Vrabel thing. How much of this defense do you think is Bowen philosophy? How much is Vrabel philosophy? Might we see some different things now that he's away from Vrabel with the Giants, based on what Bowen's background was before he became defensive coordinator in Tennessee? What's your feel for that?
Well, I think they're of the same philosophy, right? Bowen was originally the outside linebackers coach. came to be on Vrabel's initial staff when Vrabel got the job. They had worked together in Houston, so they were both part of the Texans staff, which is where Vrabel was hired from. So, obviously, you bring in a guy in like that you're going to the assistant coach is going to automatically be seeing things largely the same way the head coach does, and then there's going to be some back and forth. Well, what about this? How about that? And they kind of shape things together. Not so much when he's outside linebacker coach. Certainly, he's influenced with that position and a little bit in the big defensive picture. But then as he moves up to defensive coordinator and gains some independence, but certainly and Vrabel was big always on saying, it's about the players, not about the coaches. And so I think the talent dictated things. Mike Vrabel's known now as a old school run the ball coach, but he did say early in the season, I got here and I inherited Derrick Henry. Yeah. So I used my best player, which would have been foolish not to kind of build things around him. Defensively, they built things in a way where they were at their best, where they could rush with the front four and not help blitz-wise, and then cover with numbers. And when they were at their best, when they played their best, that's what they were able to do this last season. Jeffrey Simmons, obviously their best defensive player, as Kevin Byard kind of tailed off and then got traded. Jeffrey Simmons, their best defensive player. Danico Autry, very good. Harold Landry coming off an ACL, but got back to himself. And then previously you'd seen Bud Dupree on the outside. He was coming off an ACL. He got better as time went. This year they signed Arden Key. So that's a pretty good front four. And when they could make things work with that front four, they played pretty good defense because they could mess around with numbers on the back end and make up for the deficiencies in talent back there. And so that's kind of philosophically how they operated. Coverage multiplicity, Vrabel said back at his introductory press conference, with consistent pressure from the front four. One thing you're not going to see, I don't think, from Shane Bowen is edge players who tear off and run past the quarterback ever. Vrabel and Bowen hate when a defensive player takes himself out of the play by running past the quarterback, no matter how threatening he might be. Then they feel like they've got 10 players defending, and that guy's become useless. So it's a very disciplined rush mentality in terms of that. And sometimes with a mobile quarterback, they're going to have a very disciplined rush where they may give up what appears to you and me and the people watching in the stadium and on TV opportunities to hit the quarterback in exchange for opportunities to corral the quarterback, if you will. That's something they talked about a lot when they were playing those kind of quarterbacks.
That great information. That kind of reminds me of the Patriots philosophy, right? Kind of more of those power straight ahead rushers, the mush rush, to use lack of a better term, try to keep the quarterback in the pocket there. Great information. You mentioned the front, the run defense with Tennessee obviously was a strength, one of the best in the league in 2022 and 2021 in terms of all the rankings. And what impressed me, Paul, taking a look at some of the advanced metrics, they did that without bringing the extra safety into the box. So they were able to be the top or second best rush defense in the league without dedicating that seventh or eighth player in there, depending on, what type of personnel the offense has out there to win the numbers game. So what was it about the Titans and their ability to stop the run that really made them so good at that in 21 and 22? And obviously not as good as 23. You mentioned you lost David Long too, the inside linebacker. I'm sure he had something to do with it. What was it about the way they structured their defense that made them so good against the run?
Well, Autry and Simmons key all of that. Simmons, commands double teams pretty regularly. It's not quite lived up. And certainly the last 2 years he's dealt with injuries. So 2 years ago, I think he only missed one game, but he had ankle that was a burden. This year he had a knee, and that was a problem. And then once they were eliminated from the playoffs, they didn't force it with him. He probably could have come back if things were more important, if you will. but he's an excellent run defender. Um, Autry's a great guy against the run. The one safety who is generally involved, Amani Hooker, is a very good run defender. Their inside linebackers, which were a weakness this year, Aziz Al-Shair signed from San Francisco to kind of replace David Long. They generally play, the Titans have, with smaller, faster inside linebackers as their key guy. They had a chain. Avery Williamson went from Avery Williamson to, I might miss somebody here, to Jayon Brown, to David Long, and then Monty Rice was supposed to be the next one, and Monty Rice flamed out and was cut during the season this year, so it kind of dropped off. But they were pretty good at finding middle round. Rice was a third rounder who was cost them too much. Fast guys who could cover ground and could cover, but need to be clean in order to run defense. So those big guys in front of them could keep them clean and they could get to the ball carrier. But if they had to take on a blocker and shed, not as good. And that's the case with Al-Shair, who signed for a year. I expect he'll be back. They need somebody next to that guy who could be more effective. So I think that was by philosophical design. But also those are easier players maybe to find in this day and age. And so Shane may carry that with him there, depending on what Brian wants and what personnel wants, and how all of that comes together. But they also were very effective at Tier Tart was a big run stopping interior defensive lineman who was an undrafted rookie several years ago. This was his contract year. He played very well in that role, and this year things fell apart. He was obsessed with his contract, signed with Rosenhaus. It got really messy. He was sapping the locker room, and Vrabel finally just cut him. And he ended up with the Texans, and maybe he'll have a future there. Maybe he'll still be. I think he cost himself money because he's now going to be known as a guy who couldn't just play it out. But the Titans were good. They just kept finding defensive linemen. They weren't that good defending the run this year, like you said, but they could replenish defensive linemen. And I think Bowen certainly had something to do with that. I think he's got a decent eye for defensive linemen, non-high priced defensive linemen who could plug and play.
Yeah, it sounds like between Dexter Lawrence and Bobby Okereke, who was one of those smaller, fast linebackers who you're familiar with, obviously being with the Colts. I feel like that's probably a pretty good fit for what Bowen wants to do.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
One more question about the fronts before we jump to the secondary. Rewatching a couple of the games from the Titans late last year, I watched the Jaguar game and I watched the Seahawk game in December. I know technically a 3-4. Teams are always in sub, base defense, who cares at this point? I saw a bunch of four-man fronts, and they have the ends out pretty wide, it looks like, really wide outside those offensive tackles in a lot of their formations. Is that part of their plan to kind of integrate some of that wide nine stuff to try to develop some of that pass rush, with just four guys to create those one-on-one opportunities?
Yeah, I think so. And, ultimately, those outside linebacker edge guys are creeping forward. You see 5-man also. But I think, too, there's some Jim Schwartz influence there. Jim Schwartz was here for 2 years. He was recovering from some physical problems, some health issues. And so Mike Vrabel, he was a Nashville guy, Schwartz. And Mike Vrabel said, hey, why don't you come and, contribute in ways that you can while you're regaining your health. And so he was just kind of a senior defensive assistant, one of those titles that nobody really knows what he's doing. And at practice, he just kind of observed, and nobody really knew what he was doing. To this day, we don't know that much. And I from what I'm told and what I believe, I don't think he did a tremendous amount. He was a sounding board for Shane, but it just happened to coincide with when they got better people. It was the 2 years that Schwartz was here. So a lot of Titans fans think that, Shane was completely relying on Schwartz and that Schwartz was the difference maker. And I know Schwartz Schwartz came up in the Titans system way back when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Javon Curse days, right? When he was lining him up outside.
And Javon Curse was a wide nine guy. And Jim Washburn days, who was, one of the two best position coaches the Titans have ever had, Jim Schwartz, who made a lot of defensive ends, a lot of money, starting with Javon Curse, and Mike Munchak being the other one, obviously the Hall of Fame offensive lineman who got phenomenal offensive line play out of a lot of guys who weren't high draft picks. But Washburn and Schwartz, who became defensive coordinator after Greg Williams, they played that wide nine a lot, which was never called wide nine here and became called wide nine when Washburn got to Philadelphia.
Philly, yeah.
But so when Schwartz got here, the Titans did start doing more of that, taking guys out wider in the pass rush. And certainly it seemed like it was a Schwartz influenced thing that works for somebody like Harold Landry here, Danico Autry, who, plays inside, plays everywhere from defensive tackle to a wide edge player, Arden Key, Bud Dupree, all of these guys who've had good success. The only guy who doesn't go out that wide of their good pass rushers, Jeffrey Simmons.
All right, let's jump to the secondary. You mentioned, I think, something really interesting from Vrabel's initial press conference: multiplicity in coverages in the secondary, right? And I think you watch them; they try to show a lot of too high at the snap on every play, and then you'll see them. All right, they'll drop down. One guy will drop down to cover 3. You'll drop into cover 1, or you'll stay too deep. I think they were top 5 in use of quarters coverage all 3 years. Bowen was defensive coordinator there, so quarters is popular there. Your thoughts on how that worked in the secondary, using those different coverages? Was it effective? Because the one thing I did notice looking back, a lot of 20-plus yard pass plays over the last 3 years, which is something I know from looking at the internet, Titans fans certainly noticed over the years.
They gave up a ton of big plays. Is their Achilles heel, really? And part of it is the rush, wasn't living up to its billing and getting there. And part of it's that the corners just weren't good enough. Christian Fulton was a second-round pick who's got an expiring contract now. Some people are wondering if the new regime will give him a second chance. I think it'd be better for everybody, no matter who the coach is here, if he goes somewhere else. One of these guys that Vrabel, along with David Long, was hitting on just being a repeat offender with these soft tissue injuries, which, Titans have used ridiculously high number of players. I think 85 to 93 over the last 3 years, with just ridiculous amounts of injuries.
Wow.
And I'm with them that there's, and they need to investigate this much further, and they will now with the new regime. Some of it's just bad luck. I mean, they've got a gunner going down the sideline, double teamed, and he ends up tearing an ACL. I don't know how your training staff prevents that. But others with and Fulton right there with Long, who just pull hamstrings repeatedly. Now Long goes to Miami. He doesn't play 17 games, and it's not an issue, and everybody's wondering why that is, including me. But Fulton, repeated hamstring injuries. And some games were just completely lost and beaten deep over and over. Then he settles down and plays okay for a couple of games, and then, just completely unpredictable in terms of what you get from him. Sean Murphy-Bunting was the other corner this year, a really great, accountable guy, but very handsy, gets called for a lot of penalties and got beat too much. Roger McCreary, a second-round draft pick from a couple of years ago, really got better this year. Chris Harris was the new cornerbacks coach. He's kind of in limbo right now. Don't know if they're keeping him or not because they've hired Steve Jackson, who's a DB coach as well. But McCreary got a lot better. He was not finding the ball as a rookie, and they moved him to nickel, strictly nickel, except when injuries forced him outside. He played much better. So they made gains there. They traded Kevin Byard during the year, whose game was starting to tail off to the Eagles. But they're playing after those three corners, they're playing guys that just are not guys you want on the field on a Sunday. And
So
I
you
don't
would
know
say
what
those
you're,
issues are more personnel based than scheme based.
yeah, I don't know what
I
you're
got you.
getting out of an Eric Garrar and a Trey Avery.
I got you.
Nice gritty fighters, but do you want them lined up? The other thing that the question under Shane and throughout Vrabel's term, and Shane has said this multiple times, we asked, are your guys allowed to choose how close they line up to the wide receiver? And he basically has repeatedly said, yeah, it's up to them. Well, Samari Roll's my favorite cornerback in Titans history, and I talked to him about this repeatedly. And he said, if you're allowed to choose and you're playing far off, you're scared to get beat deep, period. I mean, that's the only reason that you're not up and trying to affect the route early.
Wow. So they have the option of whether to press or play off, huh? That's interesting.
Largely, yeah.
Okay.
And I believe Samari Roll entirely. So to me, the Titans have corners consistently that are afraid of getting beat deep. And I think most corners, to a degree, unless you're really good or have really good swagger or really good makeup speed, your number one thing is I don't want to get beat deep. All we hear about is these X plays that we're giving up. I don't want to give up an X play. But if that means that you're playing at 8 yards on 3rd and 6,
yeah,
well, you don't want to give up an X play, but you're giving up an easy first down too. So, pick your poison.
Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giants fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Here with Paul Kuharsky. Paul, let's talk about third down. You mentioned it earlier. Not a big blitz team. They like to rush 4 and try to get home and flood the zones with coverage. But I did notice they stunt a lot on third downs. They run a lot of games up front, and they bring the slot corner a lot, use a lot of simulated blitzes, right? They'll show blitz one place, bring it another place, even if it's just 4 guys to kind of throw that off. What was your experience with how the Titans kind of tried to use pressure, blitzes, or simulated pressures and stunts in terms of getting home with those pass rushes on those key 2nd and 3rd and longs?
Well, I think they just try to mix it up, and be unpredictable. I think that's pretty standard around the league, right? You don't want anybody to be able to go to the line of scrimmage or to see your alignment and have a good feel for what you're going to do so that you can convert. They had one of the worst third down years in the history of the league. I'm not remembering which year it was, which was just atrociously bad. And they were giving up 3rd and 14s and 3rd and 18s during that. I mean, it was just outrageous. But, they bounced back to play a much better third down. And if you're talking about Shane Bowen's defense, you have to talk about, and Mike Vrabel's defense, you have to talk about red zone. I mean, the Titans offense 2 years ago averaged with Todd Downing as the offensive coordinator, averaged 17 points a game, which just doesn't cut it in the NFL at this stage. And then with the new offensive coordinator this year and Tim Kelly, they averaged 17 points a game. And so the defense is put in a horrific spot. And a lot of games they kept the Titans in it to a degree by forcing teams to kick field goals. And so those X plays, which did calm down to a degree, got teams inside the 20, but it was remarkable how often the field goal kicker ended up coming on, and the Titans in tight quarters played better. So part of that's the corners don't have to turn and run and chase people with the threat of covering that much more space. But, to me, that is a big way to judge a defense, what you do down there and how often you can keep 4 points off the board. And, if you had to list the best things about the Titans defense over the last couple of years, red zone defense is the forte probably of this team. They took great pride in it. They worked really hard on it in training camp, and they got really good results. So I think that's something Giants fans should anticipate being good, and expect to be good, and have questions about if it doesn't get good.
Well, I got 2 more on the defense, and I want to ask you about Tim Kelly, Ryan Cowden, and Zach Core, the other 3 guys that they've brought in over the years from the Titan staff. So let's do the 2 on the defense first. Takeaways. That's the one thing that I noticed maybe you didn't get a ton of with this Titans defense, was just a matter of guys not making plays. To your point, the corners not being able to really locate the ball and make plays on it, or is this something more native to the scheme that they run?
I mean, they preached it like crazy, talking about them coming in bunches and all of that. They get one once in a while. They don't create anything on special teams either, which has been a big area of contention. To finally fire their special teams coach during the season for a unit that was big underachieving. But they preached it. I mean, they try to punch it out. I think the corners aren't facing the ball that often, but I also think they're not that skilled.
Right.
Amani Hooker, who I mentioned earlier, is a pretty good turnover guy. But if I'm looking for names after that, strip sacks, I think it's a little bit surprising that they haven't gotten more of them, considering the caliber of guys that they have chasing the quarterback. But Bowen preached it over and over and over, and it didn't happen for them. And I think it's a reflection of their insufficiencies as a unit to a degree, and they talked about that, like Simmons in particular, take it to the next level. We have to get the ball out more. It just didn't happen.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
All right. Last one on the defense, real quick. You talked about customizing your defense to the players. That was something Mike Vrabel preached, which is not surprising. He comes from the Patriots. That's all they did in New England, right? They figured out what the players could do. They put them in the right spot. So how much week to week are we going to see with the Giants at the start of the season, for one? For example, a guy like Deonte Banks playing more press man. That's what he's good at. Will they make those sorts of adjustments? And then number two, how much are going to see game plans from week to week customized to the opponent? Some defensive coordinators, we do what we do. We're going to do what we do, and the opponent will adjust to us. How much did Bowen really change what the Titans did week to week, depending on what the opponent did in customizing those game plans each week?
Well, I think philosophically you want to customize the game plan.
I agree.
But then, what is the varying degree of your talent? You look at the great Belichick defenses and customizing your game plans. Well, if you've got Harrison and Bruschi and Vrabel and Seymour, you got customizable guys who can do different things.
Ty Law and Darrelle Revis help with those sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. So, are the Titans didn't have that. Are the Giants going to have that? If you got one or two guys that can be really versatile and you can change things up for them to make things a lot more difficult for the offense, I think certainly they'll try to do that. That Shane will try to do that. But I'm not looking at the Giants and imagining that they're going to have a wide array of defensive players in 2024 that allow for super customizable game plans. And so I do think, there's a push and pull there. And if you do get good at one thing, you're probably going to rely on that one thing as much as you can. Then you have to look at the other team. Well, how good are they against that one thing? And how much do we have to adjust accordingly? And then you get in the cat and mouse and chicken and the egg and all that.
You can make this a yes or no answer, because I think you pretty much already answered it. Really good at developing defensive linemen, not so good at developing players in the back half and the secondary, correct? From a development standpoint defensively?
Well, yeah, I think that's fair. I also think he had probably better. Terrell Williams is a very good defensive line coach. That worked very well with these guys. He just went to Detroit now, and I think he had a knack for it. Kerry Combs, who was their original secondary coach, corner coach anyway, had more of a knack for it. Since then, they haven't lucked into a corner that's taken off that way. So I think there's some elements of luck to it as well.
Giants have brought in 2 assistants from Tennessee as well. Give us your takes on Tim Kelly and Zach Core, who Tim Kelly coming separately on offense. You already mentioned him as the OC last year. And then Zach Kerr, who was the outside, one of the defensive assistants with you guys and a linebackers coach, I believe, right?
I really couldn't tell you anything about Zach Core because
Got
the assistant coaches, the position coaches talk, right?
Mhm.
But people behind the assistant coaches don't talk.
Same
So
here. I totally get it.
I've seen him, on the field working, but I've never spoken to him.
How about Tim Kelly?
Sorry, who was the other one? Kelly.
Kelly.
Tim Kelly.
Yeah.
I think showed some promise as the offensive coordinator this year. Some cleverness. They lost their opener. Bad, in an ugly showing on a day that Tannehill was just really off in New Orleans, and he dialed up 2 plays in light of that would have been absolutely perfect. And Tannehill overthrew one of them and somebody dropped the other one, and they were 2 touchdowns, and the Titans lost like 16-15, and everybody came out of it questioning the offense. And I said, well, if they executed the 2 plays that he dialed up in light of them having nothing and being entirely flat, they would have won the game conceivably by 2 touchdowns. So I think he was really limited by what they had. Though, he was better than Todd Downing, which isn't saying much. I don't know that he would have been Arthur Smith. Likable guy, said some things at the podium that made you scratch your head. I think he'll do I think he could be a good tight ends coach for sure.
All right, final question.
I have a quick funny story about that.
Yeah, please.
I got totally duped. A shameful moment when they signed DeAndre Hopkins, and I got what I was certain was a lock of a phone number for DeAndre Hopkins, and so I had a text exchange with who I thought was DeAndre Hopkins, but he said he was busy with family stuff and couldn't talk on the phone. So I should have done nothing with it, but he gave me this innocuous quote about Tim Kelly. So he was getting reunited with Tim Kelly, who he worked with in Houston. And he said, I call him Pretty Boy Kelly. That's my nickname for Tim Kelly. And so I tweeted this innocuous quote from DeAndre Hopkins, in which he said that he called Tim Kelly Pretty Boy Kelly. I'm taking my 13-year-old son, to a baseball tournament in Lexington, Kentucky. And I get a DM from DeAndre Hopkins with a copy of the text. And he says, "What's this? We didn't talk." And I'm like, oh my God. So I pull over to the side of the road and I DM him the number. And I'm like, "Is this not your number?" And he said, "Hasn't been for several years."
Oh, no.
Oh, dear God. So in the meantime, I had texted Tim Kelly and told him DeAndre Hopkins says he calls you Pretty Boy Kelly. And he's like, I don't know what that's about, but it's pretty funny or whatever. So then I go through this whole thing where I'm DMing with DeAndre Hopkins and I'm telling him what happened, and he's being cool about it, asking me just to take it down and he'll talk to me. And I'm at my kid's tournament trying like hell to get him to talk to me and whatever. Ultimately, he puts me in touch with his people. His people tell me, yeah, he'll talk to you at the press conference on Wednesday. And so I've got to write a post saying I got duped by DeAndre Hopkins pretender, which made me look like an idiot, but made fun. And the thing is, I really hit it off with DeAndre Hopkins. I had a great year with DeAndre Hopkins, and he, I think, respected, that as a starting point and everything. So I just wrote Tim Kelly a card that I sent to the Giants, and, adjusted to not on the envelope, but in the card, I said, Tim/Pretty Boy, thanks for.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Paul, I know we're a little over. Can I ask you one more question? You're good?
Sure.
Okay. Ryan Cowden, he's been here now for a couple of years as kind of an assistant to the GM type of role. He had a lot of time there down in Tennessee, got a lot of GM interviews. In fact, the interview for the GM spot here for the Giants when they hired Joe Shane. Your thoughts on kind of what his football philosophy is and how he might be advising some of the Giants in some of the big decisions they make over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I don't know about his philosophy. I would think that he's part of the reason that these guys are getting hired up there He certainly they wouldn't be getting hired up there, I don't think, if he wasn't vouching for Shane Bowen and Tim Kelly and Zach Kerr. I think he's a good guy. Had a good reputation. Vrabel liked him a great deal, which was interesting to me. In that the word is that he was Vrabel's preferred candidate for the GM job here. Now, Monty Ossenfort disappeared in a hurry because he got the Arizona GM job, but and Monty Ossenfort, I guess, was more of a John Robinson guy from their time together with the Patriots. But there were two options here in-house that were connected to the previous regime, and the Titans obviously went a different direction with Rand Carthon. But you hear good things about Ryan Cowden. He was a background guy here who didn't want to talk much, but was a perfectly friendly guy, a nice guy, and was well liked among the people that interacted with him the most. But I can't offer you much more than that.
Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 best bank in the U.S. by The Banker as the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle. Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Paul, tell the folks where they can find all your great work and anything else you want them to know about.
Yeah, paulkuharsky.com. It's Kuharsky. And my Twitter handle, what is my Twitter handle?
Paul Kuharsky NFL is what you told me at the start of the show.
Yeah, I blanked out. Paul Kuharsky NFL. I just had a blank there, confusing it with my email address. So that tells you how good I am.
Don't give that one out.
Chasing Coaching News has a way of frying the brain. Hopefully Brian Callahan will have his staff together pretty soon and get to meet some of them at the Combine coming up. So I'm from New Jersey, South River, if that means anything to anybody. I went to Rutgers Prep. So and my mom lives in Jackson. My brother lives in Princeton Junction. So I still make a way up there, go to Avon by the Sea every chance I get.
By the way, and I should ask you, Giant fans would be interested before we say goodbye. What are the Titans doing in the draft? Because they're picking right by the Giants. And Giant fans, I think you're curious. Is it offensive tackle or bust here for you guys?
It is from my perspective, but I could see a scenario where they take a wide receiver or even Bowers.
Boy, so it sounds like the Titans and the Giants have very similar draft wish lists based on what we know down here. Paul, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for the time, and we'll talk to you again soon. Good luck this offseason and get some rest.
Take care. Thanks.
That's the Giants Huddle Podcast. We'll see you next time, everybody.
You deserve to treat yourself, so turn your tax refund into a U fund and give yourself a Straight Talk Wireless Extended Silver Unlimited plan and get a new Samsung Galaxy A14 on them. You can get a great everyday value on wireless with Straight Talk's Unlimited plan starting at $25 a line per month for 4 lines. You'll save so much you'll be enjoying that refund all year long. It's the refund that keeps on refunding. Find Straight Talk at straighttalk.com or at your local Walmart store. Taxes and fees not included. Offer valid through 4/14/24 while supplies last. Online only. Must purchase a Straight Talk Extended Silver Unlimited plan to qualify. Limit of 5 phones per customer. Family plan discount with 4 lines, all on the Silver Unlimited plan. Not combinable with auto pay discount.
This is where projects come to life. Our showrooms are designed to inspire with the latest products from top brands, curated in an inviting, hands-on environment, and a team of industry experts to support your project. We'll be there to make sure everything goes as planned, from product selection to delivery coordination. At Ferguson Bath, Kitchen and Lighting Gallery, your project is our priority.
Find great brands like Thermador at your local showroom or visit us online at ferguson.com/build.